Yes, that is true. Obviously, when you assign the to be, because in actual terms they are variables, right? In here you are writing it symbolically as dollar to dollar, assign $1. So the attribute of $1 is being assigned to attribute of dollar. So if your attributes are different, then naturally that assignment will not be allowed. Now, how you handle this case could be multiple. One is you could actually have different rules for handling constants depending on the type, or you have the constants in a constant table and actually as an attribute handle a pointer to that table, I mean record in that table. So that's a matter of design choice that you can make. But certainly you will always in every such assignment of dollar symbols, you will naturally are taking the attribute on the right hand side and putting it to the left hand side. So it's finally going to generate a C code, C++ code where a variable assignment is happening of the corresponding attributes on the on the stack. So obviously they will have to be of the same type, right, Shumnath? Does good. So good morning. Let us get started. So we have been discussing about translation of arithmetic expression. I'll just quickly recap and move on. So this was a grammar that we chose, which was kind of the programmable calculator kind of grammar, where you have a set of expressions involving multiple operators. We have used a ambiguous grammar for compactness, and we know now that using the precedence and associativity, the ambiguity can be very easily resolved in the parser. So it gives you a very compact parser. Then for expression, we are just taking a number or identifier, and then we have an assignment, which makes it a statement. And on the top, we have two rules, which basically make a list of statements, which is kind of a. So there is no separate declarations for variables. A variable assigned is assumed to be a variable declared. So that goes into the symbol table immediately whenever it is assigned. And then subsequently, if it is used somewhere through this rule, then it is looked up in the symbol table. And if it is present, then that variable can be used for its current value. Now, if it is not present there, then naturally you'll have an error. So that's the kind of simple grammar that we are trying to look at. We have talked about having attributes, and this will be a consistent design from now on, that every symbol will have one or more attributes through which we will manage this code generation process. So the first that we have here for arithmetic expression are attributes for every expression. That is, what is the location where that value of that expression will reside? Because every expression has a value, so that needs a location, that needs a memory address. So this is representative of that. So what the way we will handle is, since this value has to stay in a location, we will create temporaries on the fly. We'll create temporary variables on the fly, put them in the symbol table along with the user-defined variables, and keep the values of the expressions in those temporaries as and when necessary. And certainly, also every identifier will have a location, which is the place where the value of the identifier can be found. And finally, every numerical constant will have a value, which is the value of that constant. So these are the basic attributes of expressions. Then we have talked about having a gen temp, which generates a new temporary. just keeps on having a counter and gives you a temporary whenever you need. And then the emit function, which emits a 3-address code, and it could it certainly will have result and argument 1 always. It may have operator and argument 2 if it's a binary operator. For a unary operator, it will only have up to operator. There will be no arg2, and for a copy, there will be no operator arg2. So it's an overloaded function, assume, which does this. So given that, these are the rules that we can easily think of. So the simplest the being that E produces E1 plus E2. So when you reduce by this rule, that is, you have found an E1 on the stack, you have found a E2 on the stack, and you have a plus. So you are reducing E1 plus E2 to E. So naturally, your basic recursive assumption is E1 has a value which has been computed in E1.log, the corresponding memory location, whatever that temporary is. And E2 will have a value which is computed in the memory location E2.log. So how do you compute this reduction? Is you have to take the value from E1.log, you have to take the value from E2.log, add them up, and put them in a new temporary, which is the value of their addition. So you need a new temporary, which will, this new temporary will mean the temporary of the left-hand side, the variable of the left-hand side. So E.log will first be a new temporary will be created by gentemp, which will represent E.log, and you will emit a 3-address code, which is this new temporary E.log is assigned E1.log plus E2.log, which is a very simple way. So this reduction happens and this gets generated. We'll see example. So all of these will do in the same way, only the operator will be different. Now, if you have a parenthesis, then as you know, parenthesis is just syntactic. It has no semantic consequence. So in parenthesis, the value does not change. So whatever variable represents the value of E1.log, that same variable could represent the value of E.log. So we don't need to actually do a copy. So what we just do, we just copy the address. We say, okay, the same variable will now stand for E.log, which is something. Minus is similar to the binary operator, it's just a unary. Now, if you have E generates num, then naturally the number has the value num.val, and you need to keep it at a location because num itself is an expression. So you again do a gentemp, and then you copy num.val into that location. Whereas when you do E produces ID, you know that the ID already represents a location. So the expression E is the ID itself. So the expression E does not need a new location. So we just again say that ID.log, that address is copied onto E.log. So the location for E is same as the location for ID. So that's the whole thing that goes on. Finally, at the assignment, you have an assignment of E.log to ID.log. Because actually you have to do the assignment, so that assignment has to get emitted. And finally, the first two have no actions; they are just there to sequence the whole set of statements. So that's the simple, attribute-based translation for arithmetic expression, which is, I think, pretty straightforward. Now, let us just walk through an example. So this is the expression, and this is the corresponding parse tree. And you will have to always remember that these actions will be taken along with the reduction. So on the parse tree, when you look at, you'll have to decide on the order of operation based on the order of reduction. So what is the order of reduction? If you traverse the parse tree, because it is bottom-up parsing. So what is the order that you will know? Is if you traverse the parse tree in a depth-first manner, in left to right, then the first time you come back, return from a leaf node, is the first reduction. So the order in which you actually return from the recursion is the order in which the reductions happen. So if you do like this, start from L, you will call S, then you will have ID. These are no further traversals, E1, then this will call E2, then you'll call num. The moment you call num, then you'll come back. So this is the first reduction. You come back here, you call E, you call E4, call num3, this is a second reduction. Go back here, call E5, call num4, come back, this is a third reduction. Then certainly you reduce by this, fourth reduction. Then you return, this is a fifth reduction. Then you return, this is a sixth reduction. Then you return is a seventh reduction. So this is this is the process by which, when you are manually designing, you will be able to check on the order of recursions and take the actions. So that is how I have written these reductions here. So for every reduction now, so this is the first reduction that will happen. E produces num for this num2. So num2 has this one has a value 2. So when I reduce this, what will happen? I will have an gentemp temporary generated, which is the first temporary. So I'm calling it T00. And I will have an assignment created. Just think about gentemp and emitting an assignment of the value to the temporary. So this 2, the value will be assigned to T00. Second is this reduction, which is for this, where num, the attribute of num is 3. Again, another temporary will be generated. Now this is a second temporary, so we are calling it a T01, and the assignment is created, which is T01 gets 3. Then there's a third reduction that will happen, num4 to E5. So this has a value 4. The gentemp gives you the new temporary T02. So T02 gets 4. So these 3 reductions have happened. And then this reduction will happen. Next is this multiplication reduction will happen. So what will it do? It will take the location of the left-hand side operand and the location of the right-hand side operand, multiply them, and put them in a new temporary. So first a new temporary is created, which is T03. The left-hand side location has operand has location T01. Right-hand side has T02. So you multiply them. T03 is T01 into T02. You are doing this rule, reduction by this rule. So E1.log times E2.log is assigned to E.log. E1.log was T01, E2.log was T02 multiplied into E.log, which is T03. Next is this addition happening. So for this addition, you have the left as T00, right location as T03. So you add them, assigned to T0. And finally, the assignment, this reduction to statement, assignment statement, where the location of the right-hand side expression is getting assigned to the left-hand side identifier. So identifier is A dot likewise A, and right-hand side expression is in temporary T04. So it gets assigned to T04. So this is the 3-address code that will get generated corresponding to this. You may observe that it's severely unoptimized. It can be optimized in multiple ways. Several of these temporaries may not be necessary. Constants can be folded. We are not looking into any of that. But this is a straightforward way of generating. All those optimizations will happen. This is a straightforward way of generating the code for any arithmetic expression. And any arithmetic expression can be translated in this manner. So in the in the following slides, I have given the Bison code for doing that. So where I've formally written the emit function using the attributes and so on. I have defined the emit function here in different parameter cases. I have given you the y.tab. So this is just you check up. You'll be able to understand. This is just actual code implementation. Naturally, in Flex, we have to remember that since we have num here, we are taking the num.val we are creating, which is the goes as yy_val.inval. And for the identifier, certainly we need to look up the symbol table and get that entry. If it is already there in the symbol table, we'll get that pointer. If it is not there in the symbol table, we'll enter that, create, and return that pointer. So that's the simple rule. And then I have worked out a much bigger example here so that you can use it as a practice. I would suggest that do not look at this solution. Just try to solve this, draw the purse tree, and do these actions, and you'll have a good practice of how to get here. So these are now more. I mean, if you look into this current style, then you'll see that in this emit, we are actually printing out the statements. So it comes as like as a text. So your 3 address code comes as if as a text. So this whole thing will come as a text file. Now, naturally, if you get that as a text file, then it's very difficult to do any manipulation with that. Certainly, how do you optimize that? So you will again have to, from the text file, you'll again have to do lexical analysis and represent. So more often what is done is instead of writing it as a text file, more often you kind of make a data structure for representing a 3 address code. A data structure for a 3 address code would be a structure having 4 components. So it's a quad, and then you make an array of quads because it's coming one after the other. So what you do is every 3 address code you keep on inserting in the array. So instead of having a text file, you will have an array of quads, which is basically the 3 address translation. The advantage for that is it does not add anything special to the translation, but it's just a programming trick so that this array would be amenable to all future optimizations in a quick way. So I will not go through the code details. Those are all given here, like what is the design of the quad class and kind of showing you how using that, how you can actually from the array also generate the text file and so on. So those details I have given here, but I will not go through that. Same, the workout has been done. Okay, so that is about the arithmetic expression. Let me stop here before I move on to the Boolean expressions and see if there is any question. I think ISG have already answered the questions, right?
Yes.
There's no question.
Many questions here.
Okay, so let me proceed. I think this was so. Let me. So let us now from arithmetic expression, let's move on to Boolean expression. So Boolean expressions. So Boolean expressions are just like you can say they are just like arithmetic expression. Only thing they have only 2 constants, true and false, and they have
PPT's voice cannot be heard. I informed him.
এখন কি শোনা যাচ্ছে আইএসজি?
হ্যাঁ শোনা যাচ্ছে. It's fine now.
I got lost. Connection is getting lost. Okay. So now the slides are visible, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. So we have the Boolean operations, and then we also have that if we have any two other arithmetic expressions, then we can compare them by relational operator, any of the 6 relational operators, and that generates a Boolean result. If A is less than B, gives me either a true or a false. And I can have a true false constant directly. So this is the Boolean expression grammar. So the question is, how do we translate it? The importance of looking into Boolean expressions is the fact that if when we move on to the control construct, we'll see that every control construct, whether it is if or it is for or it is while or it is do while and so on, depends on a Boolean condition. Right? If we check the Boolean condition and then decide which part to do, or in while, we keep on checking the Boolean condition as the loop continues. So evaluating Boolean expression in an efficient way is an important factor of translation. So let's see how it goes. So let us just follow the style of arithmetic expression and evaluate this translation of arithmetic expression. So I have put an expression, Boolean expression here, and this is the corresponding parse tree. So we can say A is greater than B is the first thing that will happen here in this part of the parse tree. So which will generate for B2, which will generate a temporary T1. Next will be this part of the parse tree, which is C assigned D, which will generate in another temporary T2 assigned C equal to D. You can imagine that all these temporaries will actually are keeping Boolean values. That is true or false. Then will be this part, which is E less than F, which will generate into T3 here. And naturally no other new temporary will happen because of the parenthesis. But then there'll be a reduction here of negation of the value of B6, which will give negation of T3 into T4. And then we'll have the and then we'll have the or. Right? So this is a simple, arithmetic expression style evaluation of them. Now, having done that, you ask a question that is it always necessary? So here what happens is, given the value of A, B, C, D, E, F, you have to come to this point T6 to know what is the value of this expression. Is it true or is it false? But you can very well observe that, well, there are several situations in Boolean conditions, so that if you know a part of the expression, value of a part of the expression, you need not go to evaluate the remaining part of the expression. For example, let's say you are checking A is greater than B. Now think, if A is indeed greater than B, if A greater than B is true, then do you need to do the rest of the expression? You have an or here. Right? And by precedence, this is the most highest precedence. So that will be negated, and then it will be ANDed, and then this or will happen. Now in this or, if you know that this is true, then you don't need to evaluate the rest. Okay? So actually, if you knew this is true, all of these are redundant, because you will do all this evaluation, but at the end, you will end up with T6 being true. So, this is not the only thing. Let's say this is false. If this is false, then certainly you can't decide as to what is the value of the expression. If this is false, then the value of the expression is the value of this whole ANDed term. Now let's say in this again, if C equal to D is false, then do you need to do this? This is an ANDing. So if this is false, then you know that this whole thing is false. So if A greater than B is false, you need to do the later part. But in that, if C equal to D is false, you don't need to do this E less than F, and you don't need to do this part. So that tells us that you need to evaluate the whole expression only in a few cases. For example, when this is false, this is true, then only you need to do the whole expression to know what is the outcome. But in many cases, you would not need to do that. So when you translate by value, this kind of a shortcut in computation cannot be used. So we take a very different approach, and that is called translation by control. The way you look at is you keep on evaluating the expression, and you say that if at some point of time I know that the value is true, I will jump to a certain point. Or if at a certain point I know that the value of the expression is false, I'll jump to a certain point. So instead of having a value of a Boolean expression, say primitive Boolean expression, instead you have to jump coming out of a small block of 3 address code. And that is what I'm showing here. So while trying to evaluate A greater than B, you do not assign it to a temporary. But you do it in terms of a conditional statement. You say, if A greater than B, then what do you expect? If A is greater than B, then you know that you have a success, you have a truth in this expression. You go to 106. Otherwise, you go to 102. So I'm showing it by green and red. So it says that if A is indeed greater than B, then I go to 106, which is a true exit. That is, I've got truth here. Otherwise, I've got a false exit. So on true exit, what I will do, I don't need to evaluate anything else. In the true exit, I know that the value is true. I'm done. But in the false exit, I will have to evaluate this. So I evaluate the next one, which is C equal to D. And then if C equal to D is false, I have a red exit here, just look. So if C equal to D is false, then I know that I will go to the false exit. Because then the rest of the expression has to be false. So I have a false result. But if it is true, then I have to go and evaluate the last one, E less than F. Now in E less than F, on E less than F, I have a negation. So I can just consider it in a flipped manner that if E less than F is true, then I go to the false exit because I have a negation on that. So instead of checking that negation, I can just flip what is my true exit and what is my false exit. So I say E less than F, the true, if it is true, I say that the result is false. If it is false, I say that the result is true. So if I translate like this, which is, put together, which is a code like this, which finally takes me to 106, if my result is true, the Boolean expression is true, and which takes me to 107, if my result is false, is called the translation. Greater than B, I don't go through the code, I directly jump to here. If it is not, then I check if C is equal to D, and if C is not equal to D, I come to fall through here and go to false directly. So I have a severe shortcut in this computation. Let me stop here once to see if this thought of the shortcut control-based computation is understood. I think everybody is good. There's no question.
Just one thing you can clarify, for both the true and false, the end conditions, there is a go to 000. So what does that 000 mean?
Yes. We will get to that soon. What it means is I still do not know where to go. So we will just come to that. Okay. So this is what I'm trying to do. Now there is a question. The question is,
Shubham had a question. Isn't it creating more number of instructions?
let it create more number of instructions. You are not optimizing footprint, you are optimizing time. So it is the faster the execution is what we are looking at. So it may give you a longer code, but that really does not concern us because that's not, footprint usually is not in most cases the parameter that you optimize. But what it saves hugely is in several complex Boolean expressions, you are doing lot less evaluation than you would have done if you would have evaluated by value. Okay? So that's the basic reason. And as it is, Shubham, also to say, we will see that as we can optimize temporaries, as we discussed. Similarly, these controls can also be optimized heavily. So you might see that even after actually generating this long sequence, you may be able to optimize that better and get a lot more concrete, compact code. For example, you can see here by this process, look at 101, the code is go to 102, and 102 is immediately next statement. So this go to is obviously redundant. So you can simply remove this. Nothing changes. Now it's not very easy to immediately see that, but you can do that. That gets compacted. Now look at 102. This goes to 104. It jumps over one go to, and then 103 is go to 107. So how about if you flip this condition? If you flip the condition, instead of saying C equal to D, if you say C is not equal to D. If you are checking C is not equal to D, then this becomes 107 and this becomes 104. And as soon as this becomes 104, this becomes a fall through, like the previous case. So you can do C not equal to D and have jump to 107. So this go to will also disappear. Okay. So there are, like, the go to at 106 is obviously redundant. So that way, the length that you are seeing after optimization, this length will also get substantially reduced. So you get a lot more compacted code, which is far more efficient as well. Now let's come to the basic question. The question is, if we are generating code like this, then think about when I'm translating A less than A greater than B, I have not seen the rest of the expression. That is still in the input. And I need to have, I'm generating a target, say 106 here, which will come somewhere in the future. I do not know what the target is going to be. Please mute. Similarly, when I'm doing C compared D, C equal to D, I'm generating at 102, but I have a target which is at 104. So you can see that there are several cases where you will have references in future. Similarly, finally, at true and false, I do not know if after this whole expression has become true, where should I go? What should be the next thing I should be doing? Is it a condition of an if statement? Then with true, we should go to the true part of the statement. With false, we should go to the false part of the statement. I do not know. So if I look into it carefully, I'm going to the next slide, then you will see this is actually the true picture, that I do not know what these addresses are. These are just question marks. So how do I manage it at the translation time? So I do a simple trick. What I do is, for every such Boolean expression, I maintain two lists. One list is called a true list, which is all those quads who exit will take me to a true point, but is currently not known. The true list is the list of all those numbers of the quad, like 100 here, whose exit will be a true one, that it will go to the true point, but is currently not known. Similarly, I have a false list, whose exit, which is a number of the quad, whose exit would be a false target and is currently not known. So if I look at the Boolean expression A greater than B, then the true list of A greater than B is 100 and the false list is 101. Similarly, for C equal to D, the true list is 102 and the false list is 103. So in this way, I can represent of any Boolean expression as to in terms of a set true list and a set false list. Now, obviously, there's a question of how do we fill that up and things like that. So this is the overall schematic. So this is what is the code that we are finally going to generate. Now, this is again, earlier I was going by example. Here I'm just saying in terms of two Boolean expression B1 and B2. If it is a OR, then true of B1 will bring me to true, false of B1 will bring me to evaluating B2, and true of B2 will bring me to true, false of B2 will take me to false. Quite obvious, similarly for AND and negation. Okay. So now the attributes. So one is a true list, the list of indices of quads having dangling true exits for the Boolean expression. And false list is a list of quads who's having dangling false exit for the Boolean expression. P.lock is a location to store the value of the Boolean expression and normally will be optional. Normally we will not use that unless we have a specific assignment to a Boolean variable. Otherwise, we will manage by the control itself, true list and false. Then we have a list, a variable called next instruction. Next instruction is kind of a counter on the quad array. So we said that the 3 address codes are getting generated as a sequence. So at any point of time, next instruction is the index of the next quad in the array to be generated. So it's an array index of the next quad. And m.instruction, that we have not seen what this m is. M is some other non-terminal. We'll see what is the value of this n. Is the index of the quad that is generated at m. We'll see what it means. Then we have a few auxiliary functions. Make list is which takes an index and makes it into a list, takes a quad index and converts it into a list. Merge is which takes two lists of indices and merges them into one. Backpatch is a special function which takes a list and an index. So you know the list, either a true list or a false list, has a set of indices for each one of which the target is dangling, it's not known. So what does backpatch do? It takes such a list of indices and another index value and fills up this dangling targets with this value I. So there may be 3 indices in the list. So there are 3 instructions or those 3 indices whose target is dangling. Go to is dangling, the address is not known. And you provide I for backpatching. So that I value is put up at all the 3 of the quads. That's the backpatch function. We will see examples and it will be clear. Now we do something more. What we are doing, we have the grammar and just see that we have made some small changes in the grammar. We have put 2 non-terminals. Earlier it was, if I show you the earlier grammar once more, the standard B produces B1 or B2, B produces B1 and B2, standard grammar. But here what I have done, I've put a non-terminal before B2, another non-terminal before M. And that non-terminal has been called, has been an epsilon production. It does not produce anything. So that non-terminal is there, but it does not produce anything. So it does not give you anything. So it does not change the language. Why do you need that? First, let me tell you in principle why you need it. Suppose you have evaluated B1. After you have evaluated B1, you have a piece of 3-address code with a true list that is having a set of quads in B1 who should go to the true exit but are dangling. Similarly, you have a set of quads in the B1.false list, which are the quads whose target must be filled up with the false exit. So this is the situation that you have. And then you go on to reducing for B2. Now the problem is, when you have translated B1, what should you do if B1 is false? You should evaluate B2. What should you do if B1 is true? You should jump over, not evaluate B2. So what should you do if B1 is false? Is evaluate B2, which means any false exit from B1 must go to the beginning of B2. Any false exit of B1 must go to the beginning of B2. But how do you know what is the beginning of B2? Nobody is sitting there to mark you that this is beginning of B2. And that is where this marker becomes important. Since you have put the marker here, in terms of the reduction, first the whole thing gets reduced to B1. Then obviously the reduction of this epsilon to M will happen. And then the whole reduction of 3 into B2 will happen. So when the reduction of epsilon to M is happening at this point, you know the current value of your quad number, quad index, which is next instruction, is the quad where the first instruction of B2 after this will obviously get generated. And that is the sole purpose of having this mark. Rest of it is safe. Let us see. Let us take a look and then we'll have an example. So what will you say? What will it say for the translation? That if, so B1, when I finish B1, I have a false list. That is the set of all dangling quads, which should take me to a false exit. That is those mark that B1 has been evaluated as false. And I have a true list of dangling quads, all of whose exits mean that B1 has been evaluated as true. So what should happen if B1 has been evaluated as is false? Then B2 has to get evaluated. So after B1, I must do B2. That is where I make use of. Now, where does B2 start? I have already explained. There's an epsilon production. So B2 will have to start at M dot instruction. Just remember, here we say M dot instruction, index of the quad generated at M. So at that point, whatever is the value of the next instruction is remembered in M dot instruction. So you take that value and backpatch the false list of B1. That is, go over the quads in the false exits of B1 and put the value of M dot instruction, because all of them have to come to this point, which is the beginning of B2. So that makes sure that if B1 is false, B2 will get evaluated. The second is, what will be the true list? obviously if B1 is true, then B will be true. You do not know again where it will go because it depends again on to where does B1 occur. So the true list of B is true list of B1. At the same time, if B1 were false and B2 is evaluated to be true, then also this whole expression is true because it's an OR. So anything which is in the true list of B2 is also in the true list of B. So the true list of B is a merge of true list of B1 and the true list of B2. And finally, what is the false of B? Is B, if B1 is false, B2 has been evaluated. So all those have been already resolved. But the false exits of B2 are the false exits of B. So B dot false list is B2 dot false list. So this is a simple way we can actually resolve the translation in the shortcut. Look at the AND. In AND, what will happen if B1 is true? Then you need to evaluate B2. Because if B1 is false, you already know that the whole thing is false. So if B1 is true, you need to start at B2. So you now backpatch the true list of B1 with M dot instruction. Similarly, on evaluation, if B1 is, when will B1 be true? When will B be true? When B1 is true and B2 is true. If B1 is true, B2 is evaluated. So it will be the true list of B2. The true list of B2 is assigned to true list of B. What is false list of B? Is a merge of the false list of these two, obviously, because if B1 is false or if B2 is false. So it goes on in that way. So if I have a negation, then naturally the lists get, just all that you need to do is to flip the list. What is the true list of B is whatever is a false list. So false exit here must be treated as true exit and true exit here must be treated as false exit. So you just flip them. What if it is have a parenthesis? You just copy the list. No. What if you have a relocation, relational operator? Naturally, you'll have to generate that comparison. So you have to do if E1 relocation operator E2.
UPD has been informed that his voice is not audible.
যাচ্ছে শোনা?
হ্যাঁ যাচ্ছে।
Okay, sorry. So when I compare by relational operator, then I need to print a pair of a conditional goto, which will generate the true target, and the fall through to the unconditional goto, which will generate the false target. So naturally, since next instruction is the point where the next instruction is generated, this if will get generated in next instruction, goto will get generated in next instruction plus 1. And naturally, since I'm checking for if, this target of if, where it should go to, is a true one. So at the next instruction, I'll make a list now and make it the true list of B. Similarly, in the fall through, this has to be the false exit. So at next instruction +1, where this will be generated, I'll make the list and make it the false list of B. So these are very straightforward. Similarly, if B produces true, then we'll do a go to and make it the true list. False list will be null. And if B produces false, then we'll do a go to and make list into the false list. True list will be null. And obviously, M producing epsilon will remember the next instruction. So this is a simple but smart scheme to generate the 3-address code, conditional code for any Boolean expression. So this example I'll quickly run through, but I will request that before you come to the class tomorrow, please go through this very carefully, because understanding this is very critical to the understanding of whole control construct business. So this is a sequence of reductions. Right. First, this gets reduced, A greater than B, so which is this. Then this gets reduced, M1 producing epsilon. Then this gets reduced, C equal to D. Then this gets reduced, M2 producing epsilon. Then this gets reduced, E less than F. Then the parenthesis gets reduced. Then the negation gets reduced. Then the and then the or. So this is the order in which things will go. Here, this is these numbers in square bracket are referring to the sequence number here, so that you can see that these tuples, these quads have come from which sequence in the reduction, right? So you can see that these are numbered as 1 to 9, and this is the quad number. I have assumed that as if the generation is starting from quad number 100, right? And these are showing the attributes, since this was getting cluttered on the tree. So I'm showing the attributes here of the different non-terminals with every production. So if I start with say this production, which is reduction by rule, this one, then naturally what I'll have two lists made of. So this is, I have to generate a pair of if and go to with them and generate two lists. So that pair is generated here with A greater than B, go to. Now, do not think that 102 is there right now. It came in later on. So this is question mark. So what I have a true list here for this B2, which is 100. Please mute. So I have a true list here for B2, which is 100. So B2.TrueList, TL stands for true list, is 100. Whereas I have a false list, which is 101. False list, which is 101. So these two got generated. Then M1 produces epsilon. So I'm remembering this point because I know after this, the second part will start. But I have no way of knowing that, because what I'll get is this reduction. I cannot make out from this reduction. So I'm making out from this reduction that the next part of the expression will start. So I do M1 producing epsilon. So M1 dot instruction, second one, is kept as 102 because 100, 101 has been done. So 102 is where it will start. I'm just remembering that. Then I have this relational operator, which gets the next pair. Wherein, again, forget this, B4, this is B4. So B4.TrueList is 102. B4.TrueList is 102. B4.FalseList is 103. Okay? So all these are question mark. The back patches have not happened yet, because they will happen later on. They have not yet taken place. Okay. Then you have all these parentheses and that which does not give you anything. and you proceed in this way. I think I've run out of time. So please work through this and check the attributes regularly to see that you understand what is going on, and have the questions ready so that tomorrow when I come back, I will again start from here, discuss this, and then we move on to using the Boolean expressions in the control constructs. Quickly, let me see if there is any question.
Nothing of now.
Sir.
Yeah. Yes.
Sir, in the lab assignment, when you in the CFG that you gave, there is one shift reduce conflict due to if-else statement. So, is there a specific priority order in which the simple if and the if with the else attached should be written to avoid that?
Find out. I should not give you the answer. This is an ambiguous grammar situation, right?
Yes, sir.
Because so dangling this is a dangling else. This is called a dangling else ambiguity problem, right? And you should think about the C. What does C say in case of dangling? And what is the user specification for dangling else? And then decide that which one, whether reduce or shift, what will work in case of your parser, right? So study it a little bit. If I give you the answer, then you would not have understood the process. Right? Study it a little bit, you'll be able to find out. Okay. Any other question?
Yes,
Okay then. Thank you all very much. See you tomorrow at 8. We will continue on this. Please work out this example at home and let me know if you are clear or if you have questions. We'll use this and then move on to the control construct.